Hi, everybody. This is Dan Stolbarger. Welcome back to our trek through the book of Genesis. It's session number 13, and we're going to jump in chapter 42. This is the Word of God, so we always want to begin with the preparation of our hearts with a word of prayer. So, Jesus, we thank you for the gift of the Torah. We thank you for your word. We thank you that it illuminates, that it leads, that it guides, that it, in a sense, convicts and gives us direction in our lives. So we just pray, Lord, that we would have ears to hear and eyes to see the things that you would have for us. So we give you this time in your name. Amen. Okay, Joseph. That's where we're going to pick up. And remember, in the book of Genesis, more chapters are given to Joseph than any other character. And we don't have the time for it in this study, but it will be shocking for you. And you can just Google it on your own to see the comparisons. We've talked about the different layers of scriptures, the different idioms, types, and all of that, to see how Joseph and Jesus, their stories connect. So with that, we're going to take a look. As I mentioned, we're going to begin in chapter 42. So Joseph is now somewhat, second in command, but Pharaoh is basically going to say, hey, it's all yours, buddy. You may be in the second chariot or whatever, but I've put everything under your control. And so this famine, which we now know is going to be a long time sort of thing, 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. And we know that the plenty has happened, and now we're in the first years of the severity of the famine. And so we're going to go from Egypt. We're going to make our way about 250 miles towards Hebron and hook up with Jacob. So chapter 42. Let me enlarge this for my screen. And just a reminder, there is a PDF PowerPoint that accompanies this YouTube presentation, and it should just be a link on your YouTube page. Okay? So, chapter 42, verse 1. When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Indeed, I have heard that there's grain in Egypt. Go down to that place and buy for us there, that we may live and not die." Now, it seems like Jacob noticed a strange expression among the brothers when Egypt was mentioned. Keep in mind, the brothers knew that it was likely that Joseph would have ended up there, sold as a slave. This is an issue of their conscience. This made them feel terrible. They had a knee-jerk reaction, cold sweats, when just the name of Egypt was mentioned. It was devastating and fearful to them. Once they conspired in this lie, every single day they must have wondered, has anybody leaked the true information? I don't think they ever slept well. So they kept this terrible secret now for over 20 years. They probably never talked out loud about it, but it never left them. And then any mention of Joseph or Egypt brought about this guilt like a tsunami. And so now they hear these words, they're looking at one another. Okay. And then, of course, it goes on from there to say that Joseph's 10 brothers follow their father's advice, and they go down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befall him. And the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was now in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came, and they bowed down before him with their faces towards the earth. You remembering the dreams? Joseph saw his brothers, and he recognized them. But he acted as a stranger to them. He spoke roughly to them. And then he said to them, where do you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan, to buy food. And so Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them. And he said to them, you are spies. You've come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said to him, no, my Lord, but we are your servants. We have come to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are honest men. I wonder if Joseph had to hold back a reaction upon that statement. Your servants are not spies. But he said to them, no, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land. Now, as we mentioned, he recognized them. They did not recognize him. And if you remember way back when Joseph was imprisoned in the king's prison, in control of that, remember he interpreted the dreams of the baker. Didn't go well for him, but the cupbearer as well. That went well for him, but he forgot Joseph. But when Pharaoh had these dreams, he remembered Joseph. And so he tells Pharaoh, I know a guy. But when they go to get him, they don't take him directly to Pharaoh. We read that they shaved him. In other words, they cleaned him up. In Egypt, the men would have had every hair on their body, except for maybe their little goatees, shaved, smooth-skinned. But they would have their eye makeup. And so I've given you some of those pictures that you've no doubt seen. The eye makeup is reminiscent of the god Ra or whatever. And so this is one of the reasons. Obviously, it's been 20 plus years for one thing, but they would have never have recognized him. And verse 13 then says, and they said, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. Again, the emotions of Joseph in hearing that. But Joseph said to them, it is as I spoke to you, you are spies. In this manner you shall be tested. And by the way, this is all about this testing. Joseph has come through the fire. Joseph has survived. Joseph and his moral character. Joseph and his relationship with God. Now he's looking at the brothers that sold him. They were going to kill him, that sold him off. And he's asking himself from within, have they changed? And this whole testing is for Joseph to see if there's any actual evidence of a change in his conniving brothers. So he's going to say, you're spies, and in this manner you shall be tested by the life of Pharaoh. You shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there is truth in you. Or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And so he puts all of them together in prison for 3 days. Again, these brothers, when they made the statement, one is no more, they knew it was a lie. The brothers knew it. They had every reason to believe that Joseph was not dead because he was condemned truly to a life of slavery. But perhaps this line had been repeated so many times that they actually came to believe it. We don't know. But now they're in prison 3 days. There's something about that 3 days. And then Joseph said to them the third day, do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one, instead of me keeping all of you and sending one back to your dad, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you all go and carry grain for the famine of your houses, and then bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. And then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother. And notice what it says here, for we saw the anguish of his soul. They heard him pleading with them, and they would not hear. Therefore, because of that, this distress has come upon us. No doubt, when they threw him in the pit, we read that they distanced themselves. They were having lunch, and they moved away so they couldn't hear all of Joseph screaming and pleading with them. Calloused, hard hearts. And so again, big test. Has there been any change? Are these the same guys as they were before? And now we find the two people that we're going to see here are going to be Reuben and Judah. Okay, and one thing I will say is that even though we had that sordid chapter of Judah and Tamar, and the person of the brothers that grows the most, the biggest change as we make our way through these chapters to the end of the book, the person that's transformed the most between now and then, or when we get to the end, is going to be Judah. So keep that in mind when he pops up and when he's making comments. This is the firstborn. This is Reuben. And so Reuben answered them. And remember, it was Reuben who counseled, who said to his brother, let's not kill him, because remember, they were going to kill him to begin with. Let's just throw him in a pit. And the text tells us that Reuben's plan was to circle back later, rescue him, and take him home to dad. This is Reuben. So Reuben answered them, saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? And would you listen? Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. But they did not know that Joseph, because Joseph has only been speaking in Egyptian, they did not know that Joseph could understand them. For he spoke to them through an interpreter. And he turned himself away from them, and he wept. And then he returned to them again. He talked with them. And then he takes Simeon from them, and he bounds him before their eyes. So again, this guilty conscience. Reuben's going to say, I told you so. But this guilty conscience told them that this was a complicated mess. And the reason for all of this was because of how they treated Joseph before. Now, part of this is actually a good sign, because they're coming to grips with the truth of their actions. And so now here, it's interesting that he chooses Simeon. And we don't know why. Simeon's not mentioned as being prominent in the role of throwing him in the pit or selling him or whatever. That was both Reuben and Judah. Remember, Judah is going to come out and basically say, let's not kill him, let's sell him, sort of thing. And so we don't know exactly why Simeon was chosen, because Joseph would have known those voices of the others. Perhaps Simeon volunteered. We don't know. But we do know part of his nature was violent. This is the brother of Levi. This is the brother of Dinah. Then when Dinah is raped, if you remember that story, Levi and Simeon concoct a plan to have all of the males in Shechem circumcised, and then they literally go on the third day and wipe them out. So again, something just to remember about Simeon. So then verse 25 says, then Joseph gave a command to fill their sacks with grain, to restore every man's money to a sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. Thus he did for them. So they loaded their donkeys with the grain, and they departed from there. But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey feed at the encampment, he saw his money. And there it was in the mouth of the sack. And so he said to his brothers, my money has been restored, and there it is in my sack. And their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, what is this that God has done to us? Once again, coming to grips, and in all of this being a test that's kind of concocted by Joseph. So let's continue. Then they went to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, and they told him all that had happened to them, saying, the man, and believe me, at this time, everybody knew it, Joseph is the man. The man who is Lord of the land spoke roughly to us, took us for spies of the country, but we said to him, we are honest men, we are not spies, we are 12 brothers, sons of our father, and one is no more. And the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan. And then the man, the Lord of the country, said to us, by this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me, take food for the famine for your households, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother to me, so I shall know that you're not spies, but that you are honest men. I will grant your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. So when the brothers finally make it home, this is good for them. They're actually telling Jacob the truth. The last time they came back with a missing brother, they told a lie. They made up the story of Joseph being attacked. They put the goat's blood or whatever on his garments to give evidence to their lie. The fact here that they're telling the truth is another plus in their column. A small step, but a good step. And remember, good things always have small beginnings. And then it happened, verse 35, then it happened as they emptied their sacks that surprisingly each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, you have bereaved me. Joseph is no more. Simeon now is no more. And now you want to take Benjamin? All these things are against me. And in just a moment, we will say this. We followed Jacob for quite some time now. We've seen his lows and a few of his highs. We started with him as a conniver, heel grabber. We went through the episode where he and his mom conspired together to fool their father, to lie to their father, to steal the birthright. We know that he goes off and he meets Laban, and he's got his hands full with that. He's going to leave Laban and come back, and then he's got to deal with Laban chasing him, and then his brother Esau. And all of these situations, he's relying on his flesh. This is Jacob. This is, woe is me. Why should this ever happen to me? But along the way, there's been some high points. In Bethel, when he's leaving and he's all alone, God gives him a vision and a dream of a stairway, a ladder to heaven. And then we have that event in Peniel, where he comes to the end of himself and he wrestles with God, and his name is changed. And throughout this, we get Jacob when he's in his flesh, and we get Israel when he's walking with God in the text of the Torah. But this is a matter of perspective now. Jacob is, woe is me. Could anything else ever go wrong? And there's no way that he can see or believe that God is in control. Unlike his son Joseph, who had everything go wrong in his life, and yet maintained his moral character. Nothing negative, as we've mentioned before, is written of Joseph. One other man other than Jesus in the Bible is that said about, that there's no negative thing written, and that's Daniel. Both of them immoral character in high regard, influential in their walks with God. Joseph had every reason to throw in the towel, but he doesn't. And so, again, this is a matter of perspective. Joseph at the end is going to say to his brothers, and I'll spoil the ending here, don't blame yourself. It was God who put me here. It was God's will. God is in control. God allowed all this to happen to get me here at this particular time. If ever there was that clause of Romans 8:28, God is going to work all things out. Are you listening, Jacob? God's ways are not your ways. His thoughts are not your thoughts, but he's not on vacation. He's actually on the throne. And even though you don't see it now, he still is in control. So again, Jacob is being Jacob at this time, and this is a major pity party for him. And so the sages tell us that Jacob, once was given the news that Joseph was dead, barely spoke, barely even whispered a word in his depression and his grief. And so in the midst of all this, we read in verse 37 that Reuben then speaks to his father saying, kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you, Benjamin, that is. Put him in my hands, and I will bring them back to you. I don't know, but I would hope that the 2 sons weren't in the audience here. Thanks, Dad. Kill my boys if I don't bring him back to you. But then notice Simeon's going to be left to rot. Because verse 38 says, but he, that being Jacob, said, my son Benjamin shall not go down with you. For his brother's dead, he's left alone. If any calamity should befall him along the way in which you go, this would bring down my gray hair with sorrow to my grave. So, in a sense, the verdict is let Simeon rot. We ain't sending him down. Joseph, however, knew that this famine would go on for quite some time still. And so he knew what they took would not be enough. So this is not the end of the story. Jacob, on the other hand, probably thought, we've got enough. This famine will be over soon. And so it's not worth the risk to send my beloved Benjamin down. Chapter 43. Now, the famine was severe in the land. And it came to pass when they had eaten up the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, go back and buy us a little food. And now we've got a shift. This is not Reuben, this is Judah. So Reuben said, kill my sons if I don't bring Benjamin back. Let's listen to what Judah is saying. But Judah spoke to him, saying, the man, solemnly warned us, saying, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. We have reason to believe that the brothers went to Egypt in the first year of that famine. And Joseph knew it was going to last, as we said, 7 years, but the brothers didn't. And so they probably thought this is one bad year, but it'll be over soon. Well, it's not. And Joseph knew that. But now let's look at the progression of Judah. He's growing as a leader. And Israel, now it's Israel, not Jacob. And Israel said, why do you deal so wrongly with me as to tell the man whether you had still another brother? Why did you do that? Actually, I think the text would have been more powerful. Not that I want to change scripture, if it would have said Jacob here. Because Jacob's basically saying, you guys should know better. Why'd you give him all that information? You should have lied to him. You're out of my same gene pool. You know how we work. He says, why did you tell the truth? But they said to him, the man asked us pointedly about ourselves and our family, saying, is your father still alive? Have you another brother? And we told him according to these words. Could we possibly have known that he would say, bring your brother down? And then Judah is stepping up to the plate again, and he says to Israel, his father, send the lad with me. We will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I myself will be surety for him. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. For if we had not lingered, surely by now we would have returned this second time. So unlike Reuben's offer to kill his son, Judah is offering himself. And their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. So as you can imagine, there are probably people are dying of starvation because of this famine. They're desperate. He says, take some of the best fruits of the land, probably whatever we got left, in your vessels, carry down a present for this man. A little balm, a little honey, spices and myrrh, pistachio nuts, almonds, and then notice, and I find this fascinating, take double money in your hand and take it back in your hand, the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take your brother also and arise and go back to the man. And may God Almighty give you mercy before the man. And may he release your other brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved. Double the money? Interesting. There are now 10 brothers going down. If we double the money, it's 20 units of money. Coincidence? You remember how much they sold Joseph for? 20 units of money. 20 pieces of silver. So the men took that present and Benjamin, and they took double money in their hand, and they arose and went down to Egypt, and they stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, keep in mind, a toddler, no doubt 2, 3, 4, no older than 10 years old, when he was taken to Egypt. So he now sees Benjamin. And he says to the steward of this house, take these men to my home, slaughter an animal, and make ready, for these men will dine with me at noon. And then the man did as Joseph ordered, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, it is because of the money, which was returned in our sacks the first time, that we are brought in, so that he may make a case against us. He's going to seize us, and he's going to take us as slaves with our donkeys. Or better yet, maybe he's sending them off to bring the executioner. That's their attitude. That's their fear. That's coming from their guilty conscience. And when they drew near to the steward of Joseph's house, this guy evidently was the interpreter as well, they talked with him at the door of the house, and they said, "Oh, sir, we indeed came down the first time to buy food, but it happened when we came to the encampment that we opened our sack, that there each man's money was in the mouth of a sack. Our money was in full weight, so we have come back, and we brought the money back in our hand. And we've brought both money to buy more. We don't know what happened. We don't know who put the money in our sacks." But the steward said, "Peace be with you. Don't be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given your treasure in your sacks. I had your money." And then he brought Simeon out to them. So the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, washed their feet, gave their donkeys feed. Then they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that he would eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and they bowed down before him to the earth. Dream fulfilled. And then he asked them about their well-being, and he said, "Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive?" And they answered, "Your servant, our father, is in good health. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads down, and they prostrated themselves. The dream. And then he lifted his eyes and he saw his brother Benjamin. His mother, remember, this is his brother. Rachel had 2 sons, Joseph, Benjamin. So he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and he said, Is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." Now his heart yearned for his brother. So Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went into his chamber and he wept there. And then he washed his face and he came out and he restrained himself and he said, serve the bread. Now notice, this is interesting, and this is God's provision. This again shows us how God was in total control of the situation. So it says in verse 32, so they set him a place by himself, and them by themselves. So Joseph has a place by himself. His Egyptian stewards has a place by themselves. And the Jewish boys have a place by themselves. So notice it says they set him a place by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with them by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And, this is interesting, they sat before him in order, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked in astonishment to one another. The odds of doing that were something like 40 million to 1. And then he took servings to them from before him. But Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any of theirs. And so they drank, and they were merry with him. Again, part of the test. They're being watched. How would they react to Benjamin getting 5 times more? Special treatment. How did they respond to him when his father gave him that coat of many colors? What would they do? Some notes from some commentators. It's known from Herodias that Egyptians so abhorred things foreign that priests at least ate and drank nothing that was imported, nor would they use utensils for eating that had been used by any other culture. Here we see the wisdom of God. Before this account ends in Genesis, we will see that God brought the entire family of Jacob into Egypt, where they will be isolated from the surrounding people for 400 years. In that time, they're going to multiply greatly. They'll increase to millions. If God had allowed them to remain in Canaan, they would have simply, at one point or another, been assimilated into the corrupt and godless people of Canaan. God not only had to take the family of Israel out of the corrupt environment of Canaan, but he had to put them among the racially segregated, separated people who would not intermarry, they would not mingle with them. And so God sent Joseph ahead to make all of these arrangements. God was in control from the very beginning of this saga. Chapter 44, and he commanded the steward of his house, saying, fill the man's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack, and also put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, and his grain money. And so he did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. As soon as the morning dawned, the men were sent away, they and their donkeys. And when they had gone out of the city and were not yet far off, Joseph said to his steward, get up, follow the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? Is not this the one from which my Lord drinks, and with which he indeed practices divination? You have done evil in so doing. Now, this cup of divination, keep in mind, this is before the Torah is given. So there's no laws that are written down, But we know from other sources that the ancients used cups, sacred cups, silver cups. They would fill them with jewels, pour wine in them, and try to read the reflections. This is that process of, quote, divination. Now, it's possible, but not likely, that Joseph fell into this as well. But again, this specific revelation of God prohibiting this was not yet written down. So the point is simply, and of course the Jewish commentators say Joseph would never have done that. But the point is that this was his special cup. And it would be seen as a terrible crime to have taken it. And so they're overtook, and by this steward, he spoke to them these same words, and they said to him, "Why does my Lord say these words? Far be it from us that your servants should do such a thing. Look, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money which we found in the mouth of our sacks. How then could we steal silver or gold from our Lord's house?" And then the words, and remember, this is a test. Still, we didn't go over this, but remember, Benjamin was given 5 times more than the others. How would they react to that? They would have obviously noticed. In the Egyptian culture, the number 5 symbolizes a prince, a royalty. And so, why was Benjamin picked out? Would they have been jealous, much like they were in Joseph's situation? So again, what would their response be if Benjamin's taken? So we read, with whom they're going to say these words, "With whomever of your servant it is found, that silver cup, let him die. And we also will be my Lord's slaves." The hook is set. And he said, "Now also let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my slave. And you, all of you, I'm not going to kill you. I don't need you. You're blameless. Free to go." Then each man speedily let down his sack to the ground, and each one opened his sack. So he searched, and he began with the oldest, and he left off with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. And then the brothers, being watched, it's a test, they could have easily said what? Sorry, Benny, we're free to go. But what did they do? It says that they tore their clothes, and each man loaded his donkey, and they returned, all of them together returned to the city. What the brothers did showed Joseph there was change. According to their oath, they would now be rid of that favorite son. If they said, "Hey, listen, kill him." If they hated Benjamin as much as they hated Joseph, they would actually be glad of this. And they were free to go. But that's not what we see. They circle the wagons. They do not let Benny alone. And they all go back. So Judah now, once again, Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there. And they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said to them, "What deed is this that you have done? Did you not know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination?" Then Judah said, "What shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? How shall we clear ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants." By the way, Judah, he already knew. Here we are, my Lord's slaves, both we and he also, with whom the cup was found. For he said, far be it from me that I shall do so. This is Joseph saying, hey, the man in whose hand the cup was found, he shall be my slave. And as for the rest of you, go up in peace to your father. Now, a note, when Joseph was taken as a slave, the brothers allowed him to go, and they thought nothing of it. Now they're willing to stand with Benjamin as he faced slavery or death. Again, evidence. This demonstrated a significant change in the heart and the attitude of Joseph's brothers. And now back to Judah. Then Judah came near to him and said, "O my Lord, please let your servant speak word in your Lord's hearing. Do not let your anger burn against your servant, for you are even like Pharaoh. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, who's young. His brother is dead." And I wonder again if there's an inward reaction to Joseph when he's hearing this. And he alone, this is Benjamin, is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him. And then you said to your servants, bring him down to me that I may set my eyes on him. And we said to my Lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. But you said to your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall see my face no more. So it was, when we went up to your servant, my father, that we told him the words of my Lord. And our father said, go back and buy us a little food. But we said, we cannot go down if our youngest brother's not with us. If he is, we'll go down, for we may not see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. And then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. And the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. But if you take this one also from me, and calamity befalls him, you shall bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave. And now therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, and the lad's not with us, since his life is bound up in the lad's life, it will happen then when he sees that the lad is not with us, that he will die. So your servants will bring down the gray hair of your servant, our father, with sorrow to the grave. And then note, for your servant became surety for the lad to my father. This is Judah, saying, if I don't bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father forever. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the lad's not with me, lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father? So note here the obvious, that only Judah has risked his life to intercede. The commentators, historians write, this speech, it was simple but eloquent. It was controlled but very emotional. It was respectful yet firm. Judah offers himself as a slave, not realizing that he was speaking to the very person whom he had once sold into slavery. Last chapter for this week, chapter 45. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept out loud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard it. And then Joseph said to his brothers these words. Can you imagine? He says, "I am Joseph. Does my father still live?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. That's a nice way of putting it. The Hebrew says they were terrified in his presence. Can you imagine their reactions when they heard those words? I am Joseph. And Joseph says to his brothers, I wonder if there was a dramatic pause as he was trying to reel them in from their shock and their terror. "Please come near to me." So they came near. Then he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt." And again, I wonder if it's right away he says this or if there's another dramatic pause. Who you sold into Egypt. But now, do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourself because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. God, my friends, was behind all of this. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing or harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, the Lord of his house, and the ruler throughout all of Egypt. Some notes from Jewish commentators. When Joseph said, "I am Joseph," God's master plan became clear to the brothers. Everything that had happened for the last 22 years fell into perspective. And it's interesting, this is from Jewish writers. And so I find it fascinating what they write next. Remember, there's going to come a time where Israel is going to look upon the one they've pierced, and they're going to mourn for him like one mourns for an only begotten son. So keep that in mind, because there will come a day, as I read this, so too will it be in the time when God comes and reveals himself, and he announces, "I am Hashem." The veil will be lifted from our eyes, and we will comprehend everything that's transpired throughout history. Again, those parallels and comparisons. I am Joseph. I am Jesus, the Messiah. I am God. And the veil will be lifted. Well, I'm running out of time, so I can't go into God's not finished with Israel yet. But you know me well enough to know where I'd go with that. But it's interesting that also this note that I said that they were terrified. When he says, "Come near to me," this is again from the Jewish sages, "come near to me" implies the brothers cringed back in terror. Jewish legends, which are only legends, say that the brothers were so shocked that their souls left their bodies. And it was only by a miracle of God that their souls came back. Can you imagine? So then he goes on to say, "Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord, Lord over all Egypt. Come down to me. Do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, you and your children and your children's children, your flocks and your herds, and all that you have, and there I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty, for there are still 5 years of famine. Interesting. You're going to come to the land of Goshen. Joseph had good reason to choose Goshen as the home of his family throughout their stay in Egypt. He wanted to keep them segregated from the mainstream of Egypt's idolatrous, immoral life. He wanted to allow them to freely pursue their shepherding. It was an activity, we're going to hear more about this next week, that was hateful to the Egyptians. But Goshen was a fertile region in the northeast side of Egypt, and it was, as the scriptures say, the best of the land. And I've given you some pictures in the next couple slides of where Goshen was located, and a picture of the pyramids in the background with, you're going to see the fertileness of this area. Perfect for shepherding. And then verse 12, and behold, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin shall see that it is my mouth that speaks to you. So you shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt and of all that you have seen, and you shall hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck, and he wept. And Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all of his brothers, and he wept over them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. Now the report was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brothers have come. So it pleased Pharaoh and his servants well. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load your animals and depart. Go to the land of Canaan, bring your father and your households and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt. You will eat the fat of the land. Now you are commanded, do this. Take carts out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives. Bring your father and come. And do not be concerned about your stuff. Don't be concerned about your goods back there. For the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. And then the sons of Israel did so. And Joseph gave them carts according to the command of Pharaoh, and he gave them provisions for the journey. And he gave to all of them, to each man, changes of garments. But to Benjamin, he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments. And he sent to his father these things: 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and food for his water for his father for the journey. So he sent his brothers away. They departed, and he said to them, see that you do not become troubled. Or in other words, don't get in any arguments on the way. Be prompt, be swift, and get back, and then get back here. And then they went up out of Egypt, and they came, this is about 250 miles, by the way. And they came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father, and they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive, and he's governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart stood still, because he didn't believe them. But when they told him all the words which Joseph had said to them, and when he saw all the carts which Joseph had said to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And then Israel, not Jacob, Israel said, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. So we'll pick up the grand reunion next week as we finish this book. So again, I hope you've enjoyed our trek through Genesis. We've got at least, I think I can finish next week. I think we have one session left. Then we're going to take a week off, and then we're going to jump into our next book. And we are committed now to study through the Torah. So next up, Exodus. God bless you and shalom.